Welcome to Public Safety Talk Radio, the podcast for all of our heroes in public safety, including law enforcement professionals, firefighters, EMTs, corrections officers, healthcare workers, and more. The show is proud to be a part of the growing National Police Podcast Network. This episode is sponsored by Police Mortgage. Police Mortgage is a full-service mortgage company dedicated to serving police officers and first responders. Founded in 2008, Police Mortgage offers a variety of mortgage products tailored to meet the needs of those who serve and protect. Police Mortgage, for first responders who are second to none. I am Ken Bader, your host for Public Safety Talk Radio, and this is a special day, a special episode. I've got one of the great candidates for Los Angeles County Sheriff with me today. His name is Eric Strong. He was born and raised in LA County. He's a father, a husband, a former U.S. Marine with 32 years of experience across 4 different agencies. He's led in every corner of law enforcement, from patrol, custody to internal affairs, SWAT, community engagement, and juvenile justice, while pushing for reforms that put accountability and human life first. He is, like I mentioned, currently running for Los Angeles County Sheriff, and that's important to me because I live in LA County. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kenneth. Happy to be here, man. What a great introduction, man. I don't know who wrote that, but they did a great job.
Yeah, well, it was verbatim. You got good people there, man. What can I say?
Well, thank you. No, happy to be here, man. I'm just looking forward to this great conversation we're going to have.
Yeah, me too. And I am very sincere and want to hear, what you want to do for Los Angeles County. I've lived here for, almost 15 years, and I feel like I'm only in my 20s, but that isn't true. So, you mentioned in your campaign, in your website, that you believe in transparency and measurable outcomes. No offense, but we've heard that before from just about everybody running for office since I've been born. To you, what does transparency and measurable outcomes look like?
I think, transparency really just means opening up the doors, opening up the books. Law enforcement for a very, very long time has been hiding behind it's an open investigation, it's an ongoing investigation. And that works at some point. But what we're seeing now is we are seeing so much video out there. Everybody has those little things called phones with cameras. We're seeing so much footage, and we're starting to hear exactly. We're starting to hear more about.
For those that are only on audio, I'm showing my phone. Please continue. I apologize for interrupting.
No problem. But we are oftentimes seeing police activity, law enforcement encounters before the administration is seeing it. Mm-hmm. But also what it really means is having worked internal affairs, having worked in our advocacy bureau, having seen behind the behind the curtain, so to say, of what really goes on, I can understand why the public is crying out about transparency, about why the police cannot police themselves. I actually think we can. But I think we've lost the trust of the community because they don't understand our policies. They don't understand our investigations. And if we just opened the door and sat down with them, which I've done before, and explained certain sets of, situations, they're actually very reasonable people and they listen. Mm-hmm. So, transparency means, hey, letting them have a peek behind the curtain a little bit, showing things and the way that they're going on. But it also means when we get it wrong, saying that we got it wrong. Mm-hmm. We have been in a career where not everybody, let me say this, a profession where not every time, not always, but we always want to handle things on the inside. That doesn't build trust. We oftentimes want to handle things secretly, kind of behind the scenes and say, hey, trust us, let us handle it. And the public's just not going for that anymore. Measurable outcomes is, I think it's very easy. If we're transparent, let's see how many times we got it right. In other words, there's Civilian Oversight Commission out there. There's Office of Inspector General. And I think before we really cry about who they are, we need to ask, why are they here? If we were doing everything the way we were supposed to begin with, maybe we wouldn't have them. But also, let's just say that we do a complaint, and maybe we'll get into some of these topics, some examples that I have. Let's just say that we review a complaint and we give a disposition. Why not having somebody else say, okay, yeah, they got it right?
Hmm.
or maybe they didn't get this one right. And then we start tracking those. We start tracking that dashboard. We start seeing, how many of our uses of force were found, in policy. How many of them were found, hey, could have done better. How many of our complaints were found reasonable? Coulda, shoulda, woulda done something better. And just letting the public see that. And then it's going to help us also start figuring out, hey, are we getting it right in terms of the public's eye? Because that's what we're really supposed to be doing. So that's kind of what I mean with dashboards and numbers.
Okay. So, well, you're to a certain extent, you're a little bit preaching to the choir. I've been a supporter of law enforcement for decades, and although I've never been a police officer, I've worked with hundreds of them for in different capacities over the last 20, 25 years. And it's my understanding that transparency is kind of a gray area. And I think I agree with you in terms of pushing the envelope as much as you can on transparency. Like, for instance, there's a big thing going on right now on ICE agents and making sure that they have cameras, body cameras. And I completely support that because what I've found as a civilian that supports law enforcement, that when they have body cameras, 99% of the time it proves that the police officer did it right. And that's a transparency that I fully believe in. But there's sometimes where you need to keep things close to the vest. You know that better than I do. What's the fine line of transparency of, all right, we're trying to, truly build a relationship with the community. Maybe that 30% that's on the fence that aren't like me, that are staunch supporters, and aren't the, 20 to 30% that are just gonna hate you no matter what. What's kind of the gauge of, to really gain the trust of that 33% that's kind of in that gray area? What's the level of transparency that you could comfortably go to, if you will?
I think we have to identify what are we talking about being transparent about.
Yeah.
Are we talking about a criminal investigation and just throwing it all out there and giving up our investigative techniques and processes so the crook can figure out how to get away or knows where we're looking so he can hide stuff? No, that's not what we're talking about. At least that's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
I'm saying that, from what I'm hearing from the outcry is the transparency on the internal side. Like, what are they doing internally? How are they handling the complaints, the uses of force, the shootings? How are they handling those big risk management, big liability issues? Are we really having accountability? So, there is a fine line. Number one is this. We have protections here in California that say, police officers, POBAR, and some of
Hmm.
their files are confidential as far as their personnel records, right? But let me give you an example. A complaint
Please.
comes in and somebody says, hey, I'm complaining. And let me give you one example that I remember reviewing one time and kicking back. Guy says I was put in the back seat of a patrol car for 4.5 hours. I told the deputies repeatedly, hey, I got, can I leave? Can I get out? Can I get out? I got to go to the bathroom. Short story long, he ends up soiling himself in the back seat of the
Hmm.
patrol car. Deputies get out, they let him out. Okay, you're free to go. He walks home, wet and cold,
Sure.
and he calls and he files a complaint. So this lieutenant gets the complaint and processes it, and this is what they write in the complaint. Well, I checked WebMD and I found that the adult healthy bladder can hold 181 millimeters or whatever of liquid, and an healthy adult male can hold their bladder for 8 to 10 hours, as evidenced when we sleep. We're not constantly getting up and going to the bathroom. So therefore, this guy did, the deputies did nothing wrong. This guy just decided to pee on himself while he was in the
Right.
backseat of the car. He didn't have to. So that's pretty much the thumbnail version of what he submitted, right? How ridiculous is that? And when I called this lieutenant back into my office, I mean, I almost had to pre-complain on myself with the policy of equality thing. Like, okay, so I'm about to use some very choice words there, and
Hmm.
let's just say that let's just say that that's what you wanted to go with. Let's just say that that's the argument that you wanted to go with. That that's what you were presented. You never
Right.
asked the man if he was healthy. You never asked the man when's the last time he'd gone to the restroom. Did he exceed that 8 to 10 hours? You know what I mean? You never asked the man how much he drank or anything like that. So the reality of it is this: if you're a victim, you're not sitting in the back of a patrol car for 4.5 hours. If you're a
Hmm.
witness, we're getting your information, we're getting your horsepower, we're getting your statement, and we're going to get a phone number or address so we can come back to if we miss something. If you're a suspect, I need to take you down and get you booked, get you identified, and you should be down at the station sitting there somewhere. So there was really no reason for it. So in a case like that, what does transparency look like? Do we have to give the deputies names that were involved in the incident? No. But can we give the public the incident, the facts of the incident, even if we were to redact the deputies' names and say, you look at this set of facts and you determine of whether or not this was reasonable or not? Now, of course, that never made it past my desk. It never made it to division because I did not allow that justification to go by. But there, trust me, for a lieutenant, and he was a seasoned lieutenant to have written that, and I asked him what was he thinking. He says, "Well, Eric, our job is to support the deputies." I said, "It's not to support stupidity. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's not that that's
Yeah.
not what we do. We give them the tools and the resources and the training needed to do the job right. We don't write it right, WRITE it, until we can make it RIGHT. That's not what we do. So, but what it told me is that he had probably done something similar to that before, and it flew somewhere, you know what I mean, in the
Yeah.
chain, or why would he do this? So my thing is, if the public gets to see this and we start seeing like, hey, sheriff's department, you sure you want to say this is in policy? You sure you want to say this is complaint? Um, then we get some feedback. We get
Hmm.
some feedback. That's kind of what transparency looks like. It means just kind of opening up the doors, having a civilian, and I'm not saying we post it in the newspaper. I'm saying we have some civilian advisory committees. We
Yeah.
we have the civilian oversight, but I think it should also be geographic. I mean, the sheriff's department has several stations. We should have a civilian advisory committee at every station that's reviewing things that are pertinent to their community and where they are. And maybe it's a randomized selection. We're not going to ask them to review every complaint, every use of force, every pursuit, but maybe it's a
Hmm.
randomized selection, and they just get a chance to look in to what we're doing and how we're making our decisions. I think that would be go huge with building trust.
And now a word from our sponsor, Police Mortgage.
As a first responder, control isn't optional. It's how you do your job. But when it comes to buying or refinancing a home, most lenders don't get your world. Police Mortgage does. They specialize in working with first responders, walking you through the process, breaking down your options, and helping you lock in competitive rates without the runaround. Take control of your financial future with people who have your back. Visit policemortgage.com or call 312 499 8878. Police Mortgage for first responders who are second to none.
And learn more about Police Mortgage from their podcast, The Mortgage Beat, another podcast in the National Police Podcast Network.
Let's segue into another subject that you talk a lot about, which is mental health crises and substance abuse. And, we have a little bit of a problem with that in Los Angeles County. It's my belief that yeah, we need to give people help, we need to give them a hand up, but they also need to take some responsibility too. Now
Mm-hmm.
granted, if you're mentally ill, that may be a little bit difficult, but talk a little bit about mental illness, substance abuse, and how you will handle that if you're elected.
Well, I think what we've done is we've criminalized being mentally ill and having addiction issues. I think we really have, and so I will say this, that throughout the years, I've had multiple paradigm shifts as it comes to this. Starting my career in the early 90s, I was, hey, man, this is the war on drugs. I was out there. I was, you know what I mean, hooking and booking and arresting gang members and drug dealers and people that were using drugs. And I'll be honest and candid, I really thought I was doing the Lord's work. I thought I was doing
Hmm.
what was best for society and community. Um, but then as you grow older, and I think we should evolve. Our mindset should change, especially as we come across different experiences. A couple of things happened to me. One is I had a cousin that was addicted to crack. And,
Hmm.
the family oftentimes would say, oh, she just needs to do better. He needs to do this. He needs to do that. He needs to make better decisions. And I saw some very tragic things happen um, to them in their life. And a couple of times I remember, oh, that's it. That's the thing that's going to change. That's the thing that's going to, kickstart them into, getting clean and doing this stuff. And I saw them go right back into it once they got released back into that environment again. And I started asking myself, and started kind of reading up and learning a little bit more that addiction is an illness. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Sure, we can make better choices. But then I went to the FBI National Academy. And in 2016, I was in a class, and the class was all about dealing with difficult employees. And the first assignment was describe how addiction personally impacted your life. Everybody in the class, all college level courses, 40 people had to read their thing. And I tell you what, this is the top leadership in the country and even international. We had 48 states represented, 231 students, right? And in this class, out of 40, I want to say about 7 or 8 people took their chip out
Mm-hmm.
and they talked about their own sobriety. They talked about 29 years, 16 years, 3 years, 7 years, 8 years. And there were probably equally as many more that wrote about personal issues with addiction. And I said, wait a minute. If they are here, they are in the top leadership positions across the nation, and they've suffered with addiction, they're salvageable, right? There's something in there, there's a fix, there's something that we could do to say, hey, there's still good people with purpose and leadership out there. So now I start really kind of looking and looking at kind of the mental health side, and I'm starting to meet more. I don't know why, but they just start coming in my life. I'm starting to meet people that are suffering or telling me, hey, I've been clean and sober 29 years. And so I start really looking into this, digging in. And what I realize is this, that all we have is an incarceral system to deal with society's problems. It's all we have. There's all kind of resources out there. There's all kind of programs out there that you can sure walk into or try to get your family into. But the only system that we have that is pushed upon people is the incarceral system. So let's look at this scenario, Kenneth. You got a guy in the middle of the busiest intersection that you could think of, whatever it is, and he's at Wilshire and Hill or somewhere downtown. He's naked. He's playing dodgeball with the cars in the middle of the street.
That was just a bad day for me, man. We talked about this.
I didn't say any names. I wasn't going to tell everybody it was you.
I've been sober for over 6 years. That was a long time ago. Go ahead.
There you go. There you go. And listen, that is my point right there. It was a bad day for this guy that was there too. But all we have is law enforcement pulls up. He's naked. That's indecent exposure. He's in the middle of the street. He's obstructing traffic. Heaven forbid he has a stick, a golf club, a bat, a crowbar, and he's hitting cars. Now it's vandalism. Now we come to the point where we're trying to give him orders. Now we probably done rolled up with lights and sirens, right, and agitated him. But now we're trying to give him orders and commands. He's not listening to us. So now we're having obstructing, delaying, resisting. And if we get into a use of force, it's then going to become an assault on a police officer. If the police officer has a scrape, bump or bruise, it's going to be a felony assault. And so what have we really done? What help have we really gotten this person? Nothing. We rolled around, got them all dirty, and sure, we're going to put them in jail and we're going to stabilize them. But then what's going to happen as soon as they get released, they're going to go right back into that same environment, right? And they're going to go right back to doing what they're doing because there's no stabilization, there's no warm handoff. Now, I want to be very, very clear. I am not talking about the people that stabbed 3 people, that killed, somebody on the train or on the bus. I'm not talking about, there is a place for people that are evil and commit real harm. What I'm talking about is this person that is in a psychosis, in a crisis, and he doesn't know where he is. And the only crime he committed is trying to figure out, like, why am I almost waking up, trying to figure out, why am I in the middle of the street? The crime started more than likely with either mental health or substance abuse or a combination of both. I just think we need to do better. I think we need to do better with finding, number one, a co-responder model that can get people into treatment and to help that's not necessarily jail. When you go into our jails, Kenneth, come on. I think you've probably read the news. Just 6 months ago, the Attorney General is suing for the inhumane conditions in our jail, right? When you go into the jail, it is not conducive to mental well-being.
Of course
it's not even conducive to your medical well-being. So we're taking people that are in a psychosis, in a crisis, we're putting them in a little cell for 23 hours, maybe even longer. They're not having any human contact. If you just look at it, they're not getting their mental health appointments. They're not making their medical appointments. How are we improving society? We're not. I just think we can do better.
Well, we certainly could do better Yeah, the question is, what is the solution and how do we implement it? My wife worked in the healthcare industry, worked for in case management for the Orange County organized health system for a long time, and we've had more than one discussion on this. You know,
Yeah,
me being
yeah,
an
yeah.
alcoholic, 6 years in recovery, and her
Congratulations.
thank you, and her dealing with the mentally ill. One of the things that I'll quote Susie Price, who unfortunately just barely lost the mayor's race here in Long Beach, because I thought what she said was right on point, that it's inhumane to allow the mentally ill and the substance abusers to just simply live on the street. Yeah, now tossing them in a cell, I agree with you, is not necessarily solving the problem. It solves the problem temporarily because there's the obvious, we need to protect the law-abiding taxpayers that are going through that intersection, that don't want their car to be hit with a club if he's got one. They don't want their kids to be looking at a naked man. That's
Absolutely.
that's their right as well to not have to
Right.
deal with that. But I think the real question is that we put a lot of money, especially here in the state of California. I know from a number of people, we throw a lot of money at this
Yeah.
problem, a lot of money at this problem. And as a taxpayer, I'm
Hundreds of millions.
exactly. And as a
Right.
taxpayer, I'm more than happy for that money to go to that. If I'm a business guy, I want to see results. I want to see, all right, what's going to make a difference. If I could write a check right now, Eric, and have everybody that's substance abused and mentally ill get the help that they need and actually want the help that
Right.
they need, I would be all for this. So what's the solution, my friend?
So I think the solution is, first of all, let me ask this. When's your birthday? Sobriety
Oh,
birthday.
it's Brian, February 23rd. Just celebrated it.
Okay. You just celebrated. So happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy belated birthday. Um, here's what I think is a partial solution. And let me just say this. This goes back to the walking along the beach with thousands of starfish that have washed ashore and somebody's throwing them back in and they say, well, you're never going to make a difference. There's thousands. Well, I made a difference to that one. You
Mhm.
know, I think what we have to be willing to realize is that we are going to impact percentages, small percentages. I think 10, 15, maybe 20%, which leaves the vast majority still out there, but we're making an impact. And every time we can impact 10, 15, 20%, that number that we're percentage, that we're kind of become smaller. So number one is I think we need a true co-responder model, right? I don't believe that law enforcement alone should be the only resource out there. Now, we have models that are out there, we have systems that are out there, but are they really truly being funded and given the resources that they need? Because most of them they end at like 5 o'clock. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
You know, um, so we need a true co-responder model with cross training with law enforcement and the behavioral health technicians, the addiction specialists, the mental health, social workers that are out there that are trained to deal with this. And I can tell you this in the sheriff's department, when I first came on, we had like maybe five, six, what we call MET, the mental evaluation teams. And if
Mhm.
you called one, five or six is countywide, right? So even right now, if we have 25 countywide, you're still looking at a 3 or 4 hour response time.
Mhm.
So you can't tell somebody in a mental health crisis, hey, I need you to time out, put that on hold for about a couple of hours until they get here. It doesn't work that way. So I think we need a true co-responder model that is placed at every station, right? And it's got to be 365, 24/7. I can tell you that here's why people call 911 at 3 o'clock in the morning on
Mhm.
Christmas Eve, because there's nobody else out there. That's why they're calling us. So we need a true co-responder model with the right training and deputies, not every deputy, but we need to tier training for deputies like we would anything else, like we would a motor officer, like we would a detective, like we would a field training officer, right? There needs to be an incentive for those people because I'm telling you, there are deputies out there that have mental health in their family. They
Mhm.
want to do that. They're experienced already because maybe they've dealt with a parent their entire life. Maybe they've dealt with a parent that and they cared for a parent that was suffering from, substance from addiction. Maybe they have a brother or a sister or an uncle or something. There are deputies out there, but we're not bringing them in and we're not making the job rewardable to them. We're not making the job appealing to them. But We also need to partner with some of the private facilities that are out there. We cannot rely on our county and our city resources. They are already inundated. They are already overworked. They are, again, let's look at Department of Mental Health for the county and in the
Mm-hmm.
LA County jails. They cannot get to everybody. They cannot see everybody. There's people that are supposed to be checked in on every 48 hours with a new medication. They're not being seen for a week, and that's a system failure. It's not necessarily, well, I just don't care. I don't feel like seeing them. No, it's a system failure because they just don't have the resources. So I've been talking to and speaking with mental health industry leaders, addiction industry leaders. There are hundreds of them out there, and they want to participate in the process, but they've been blocked. So what we need to do is we need to open up the doors, and we need to have a system in place where it says, okay, I'm in Compton today,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we get a person that's suffering from addiction or mental health. We have the scenario that I just provided for you. There are detox centers that have doctors, that have nurses there that we can get them into. If there's a mental health evaluation, but the deputy can't do it. We need the people that are the experts in the industry to do that. Let's say we're in Malibu. There are plenty of places out there that can offer the same services. If we're in Santa Clarita, if we're in San Dimas, it doesn't matter. We need to partner with the resources that are geographically um, suitable, that have the right facility and the right staff, and we need to start using them. We can still have leverage on these people if we need to. In other words, they could still kind of be under the care and custody of the sheriff's department, right? But we need to stop feeding them into the jail, just packing more people into our jail. And we could probably start taking some of those people that are stabilized in our jail out and starting to putting them in the resources and facilities that are going to be able to monitor them, give them the resources, give them the purpose, give them the training and all of those things. And taking somebody to jail, and the system is not holding people. We get
Mm-hmm.
somebody in a situation like that, and they're in there 2 to 3 weeks. They barely become stabilized, and all we're doing is we're releasing him out. Now he was naked, so we're releasing him in a paper jumpsuit with maybe 10 to 15 days worth of medication. And what are we saying? I'm letting you out the front door. What are they going to do? They're going to go right back to where they came
Mm-hmm.
from as soon as they can get there. They're not going to continue to take their meds. There's no monitoring there. So we need to partner. We need to collaborate with the industries that are out there that are doing the work, that are successful, that are ethical, right? Because I know
Mm-hmm.
there's probably some treatment centers out there that are not very ethical,
No, are
but
you saying that
I,
there's fraud in California and some people that are just taking money and not
I
helping
didn't
people?
I
That
didn't say
doesn't
that. I
happen,
didn't say
Eric.
that, Kenneth. I don't.
I said
But
it.
yeah, no, but I mean, you're right. We need to make sure that they're vetted, they are there, and we need to start doing things different than the way that we've always done them. Listen, you know what what do they call it? The definition of insanity? It's we just
Mhm.
keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. What have we done different in the last 20, 30 years, for mental health? Sure. The other thing I'll say to this is that the things that we have done different have not come from proactive policies. They're coming from reactive. We're responding differently because the
Mhm.
public is making us. We're responding differently because legislation is making us. And when you don't have buy-in from the leadership, all you're going to do is check the box at the minimal standards. And we're going to continue on this cycle that we are. So, collaboration, co-responder model, and one of the things I just want to add is this. If
Mhm.
we bring in a collaborative co-responder model, a deputy that has gone through additional training to deal with mental health and addiction, partnered with somebody else, and we know that they can handle the job and they are right there on the scene, just like we bring in a traffic deputy when there's a traffic collision,
Mhm.
right? First deputy on the scene gets there, traffic guy gets there. What does that deputy do that was first on the scene? He leaves and he goes deals with the public safety stuff. We are going to free up other deputies to go deal with the crime and the public safety stuff. We're
Mhm.
going to actually enhance our resources because now they're not down for 3 or 4 or 5 hours, sitting at a hospital, waiting to be seen or something like that. So the idea that I have is it's going to bring a specialized team in there, just like we have for everything else. And it's going to free
Yeah,
up deputy sheriffs.
yeah, I do appreciate to a great extent your way of thinking on a couple of levels. One, I've always one of as a civilian that supports law enforcement, I've always been frustrated from afar as using the law enforcement profession as the catch-all. Dogs loose, let's call the police. There's a homeless person,
Leaking growth.
there's a homeless person on my lawn. Call the police. There's three guys breaking into my liquor store. Call the police. Well, the last one, yeah, I kind of want you guys coming to that one, but to your point, if it's somebody that's just naked and confused walking in a street, do I want somebody with a social worker training to help somebody that's truly confused and not a threat? Absolutely. Yeah, that just makes common sense.
Right.
Do I want a social worker being sent to a domestic violence situation? Probably not.
No, no. Yeah. And it's all, listen, when you start talking about these co-responder models, people go to an absolute. Oh, are they going to get there and, somebody's
Mhm,
going to pull out a gun or a machete and they're going to get killed? Well, those are worst case scenarios. Yes, that happened? Yes, of course. But is that the normal call? No, it's not. We get hundreds and thousands of calls with people that are under the influence, with people that are,
mhm,
suffering from mental health crisis that don't turn into a shooting or somebody with a machete cutting up, their family and stuff like that. So there is a place for them. And those calls, like you said, that domestic violence, that's not the one that the social worker comes. So the system that we're building, and I actually have a pilot program that I've been working on, it's going to be very specific. No, they're not going to the domestic violence calls. No, they're not going to the robbery calls.
mhm,
No, they're not going even probably to the excited, delirium calls. You know what I mean?
mhm.
But they're going to go to those calls. Hey, there's a guy naked walking down the street. That might be a red flag, or there might be a signal that says this might be a good one for the social worker. You
Well,
know,
at
and
least at least the man walking naked down the street, you pretty much know that he doesn't have a concealed weapon.
there you go. Yeah. Hey, threat eliminated, right?
So,
Absolutely.
and I do appreciate what you said in collaboration. Being a business guy, and it's not a popular opinion always, but I always believe less government is better government. Let's get private businesses that know what they're doing, involved. And to case in point, my wife and I were watching the news, and all the way on the other side of the country, Kathy Hochul is begging wealthy people to come back to New York to be able to give money to social programs. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but that's basically what she said. And I remember sitting there saying, well, I am not a wealthy person, but I know wealthy people. Wealthy people, a lot of them do like to give. I'm on the board of the Wounded Blue, and we, God bless them. There's some wealthy people that don't want their name to be known that just give money to the Wounded Blue because they believe in that charity and they want to do that. But at the same time, they want to know that that money is actually
Right.
bringing results, to actually be a part of the change that you want to happen. So before I move on real quickly, I love that collaboration idea, in getting the private sector involved in this, because it's been clear in California that just throwing money at the problem, isn't working. It's a reactive thing, as you mentioned. So, how do we really get collaboration from some of these private individuals, these private organizations, to give us the help and a solution and some progress that we need?
It's funny because as I've been going through this journey, of course, one begets another, and
Hmm.
so as I meet one person, they say, "Hey, I want to introduce you to this other person. They might be good." And and then they say, "Well, hey, let me introduce you to so and so." And what I'm finding out there is that there are lots of private entities out there, and guess what? They're all interested in the solution. You
Hmm.
know, most of them have given up on trying to help with, trying to partner with law enforcement because they've tried in the past, and I'm sorry, and it isn't working. You know what I mean? Or they're being shut out. So what do? They go and they start their own, organization, and they just move on and they just keep going. So, the fact that I'm approaching them and saying, "Hey, let's have this conversation." They are excited. They want to help. Listen, we know that a lot of people that are in the recovery industry are in recovery themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they are there because they have a passion for it. A lot of people that are in the mental health industry, they've dealt with family members that have had mental health issues
Mm-hmm.
themselves, so they want to help. And it's just about starting those conversations and seeing where we can mesh together. Like, how can we fit? Like, how can law enforcement and these private industries, how can government and these private industries start working together, and somebody being willing to say, hey, let's do it. Let's
Mm-hmm.
figure it out. And I think that's what I'm looking for. And that's who I am. I'm willing to say everything we've been doing, we've thrown $400 million in LA City alone, if not more, at homelessness. Have you seen an impact? Have you seen an ounce of, I look at these tiny home, ideas, right? And you get like, I remember when they were first going through, oh, we're going to build these tiny homes, and first contractor was $100,000. Oh, we got it down to 80,000, and it's 70. Oh, we settled on this contractor. It's $57,000 per home. It's a great deal. We got all this, and then you go up off of the 110 freeway on the way to Pasadena between downtown, and you see like 12 of them on the freeway. These things are about as big as a shed that you can get at Home Depot for 700 or 800 bucks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so are we really making an impact? Are we really doing anything? No, but the government is always going to spend a whole lot more money than they really need to. Why? Because it's monopoly money, really.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's writing a check for $54,000 for one shed that's, 6 by 9, that you can get at Home Depot. It's an exchange of money, you know what I mean? And how are these vendors being located? And it's just there's so much that needs to be looked at and fixed. And I think what we do is we get in, we find out who the people are. You really got to get rid of a lot of the bureaucracy,
Mm-hmm.
and get rid of that red tape. I was talking to a guy and he said, "Hey, listen, you know what's messing it up in California?" He said, "What?" He says, "The regulators."
Mm-hmm.
So he teaches master's level business classes, and he starts off every class with, "Hey, who wants to go into government regulation?" Right? No, anybody in any industry, no matter what it is, they don't want to be in regulation. They become regulators because they can't get the job doing the job that they went to school for.
Having spent a number of years in banking, you're speaking my language. So let's talk a little bit about retention. Retention in the law enforcement industry, I think, has gotten a little better, but is hard to use a real technical MBA word. It's hard. Case in point, I was at the SHOT Show in Vegas a couple months ago. Arizona State Troopers, were there to booth, trying to recruit. Beverly Hills Police Department was there trying to recruit. If I was a little bit younger, I'm 56. I got a bad back, bad knees. Maybe if I was 20 years younger with everything they're throwing at good people, I might actually think about changing
Right,
my
right.
career and going to law enforcement. But tell me your ideas of recruitment, hiring, retention reforms that really strengthen standards and rebuild trust, as you say.
Yeah, you really want to know, Kenneth? You really want to get into that with me?
Nah, screw it. Let's just end it. I've
Let's
already
just end
talked
it
to you
here,
too
right?
long.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, good luck, man. Yeah, let's get
Thanks.
into it. Go for it, man.
So I have seen the change over the years of people feeling like this was a calling. I have seen people come into the profession in the last 10, 11 years, go through an academy, spend all that time going through all that training, and they get there, 6, 7 months. Yeah, it's not for me. I quit. I think part of it is at a generational. Uh, we're different. You know what I mean? You're 56, I'm 56. I don't know why you look so young. I look the way I do, but you know,
You look
um,
better. You got
you,
hair, man. So
that's one good thing I can say about, I don't know, my genes. I do have some hair. Um, but I think part of it is generational. Our generation is not committed. I mean, we didn't, I know when I was growing up, my parents were like, hey, you get a good job. You know what I mean? You show up to work on time. You do what you're supposed to do. You can promote through the ladder, and after you get to your retirement age, you retire. We're in a much more microwave era. I don't like it anymore. I'm going to change. And so I think part of it is just the mindset, that comes along with this generation that's had these phones and technology in their hands since they were born. But I also do believe that leadership, administration plays a huge role. And I'm going to speak specific to the sheriff department. Everybody's having a problem recruiting, but it's when you start looking at people that are leaving early, retiring early. It's when you start really looking at people that are leaving and going to other agencies. That's a demonstration of an administrative issue. When you're 52 with 28 years and the magic numbers are 55 with 30 years. And when I say 55 with 30 years from 52 is going to give you like a 15 to 18% raise in your retirement, and you say, I'm just done. I don't want to be here anymore. I'm leaving. That should tell you something, right? And it's not because they can't do the job anymore. It's not because they're so beat up. It's not because it's so difficult. Most of the people that have gotten that stage in their career, they're kind of in a decent position where they're not, doing the backbreaking laborious work anymore, but they're deciding to leave. So I really look at the way law enforcement has turned into, and what it's turned into is a business. What I mean? It's become a business model with our cities, with our county, with even the leadership in it. Leadership has become a place where they're more interested in keeping my position. I want to make sure that I get my contract renewed, or I want to make sure I get reelected. And so what do I have to do to make everybody happy? Whereas what we're not doing is we're not supporting the mission, and we're not supporting the people that are behind us. One of the biggest things I see in law enforcement is every time a new leader comes in, they say, oh, we're going to hold everybody accountable, right? We're going to hold everybody accountable. And it's all the people in the black and whites that are getting held accountable. But it goes back to that lieutenant that I told you that wrote that disposition for the complaint. There's a saying, what do deputies do? They do what they're allowed to do. So why isn't that accountability go up the chain? And that's what a lot of deputies and a lot of law enforcement see. They're not seeing accountability at the highest level. Now, here's the other thing I want to say. And here's where I will tell you this. If you Google it right now, what's the demographic of law enforcement nationwide in 2026? I will tell you, right now, today, in 2026, it's 70% male white. 70% male white. So what does that mean? That means that 30% is not black, it's not Latino, it's not Asian. It means 30% is everybody else. Everybody else, right? So when you look at an organization or an industry that is 70% male white, and if you go from the East Coast to the West Coast, the hiring standards and systems and backgrounds are pretty much the same. Would you think? I think most agencies go through a background. Most agencies, you got to go through an academy. You got to go through a psych. You got to go through a medical. The hiring standards are the same. So I hear this all the time. Oh, our agency is a demographic match of the communities that we police. What that means is if 10% of the community is Asian and we have 10% of our department that's Asian, it means we stop. If 8% of the population is black and our department meets 8%, we stop, which is really just another word for quota. That's all it is. Because if you still have good qualified candidates on the table, why aren't you hiring them? But if you get to a point where you say, okay, we're at 10%, doesn't matter how many good qualified people are still there that are still applying, we've met our quota, that's a problem. I think that we could recruit a lot better. I think that we could bring people in that want to hire, but we have to go and we have to appeal to the cultures. We have to go and we have to appeal to the communities that want the jobs and want the hiring. And I'm sorry, in 2026, when we look at an industry that's still 70% male white, you can't tell me that's not intentional. It's not deliberate. I just truly believe that. So I think we're leaving a lot of good candidates on the table. I think we're not recruiting the way that we could. I think that we're looking at it, and I've seen it all too often. I mean, when I was a unit commander of Audit and Accountability Bureau, we did an audit on the hiring process, and it showed some very discriminatory practices, right? So I think part of our problem is that I'm just being quite frank and quite honest with you. We have discriminatory hiring practices, and what that means is that I'm going to speak to the sheriff's department. We're 3,000 people down. What that means is that the sheriff deputies that are there out there doing the job, they're the ones suffering. They're the ones being forced to work 8, 10, 12 shifts of overtime a month. They're the ones not seeing their kids, not making it to the baseball games, the recitals. They're the ones getting stressed out by their family because the wife is saying or the husband is saying, you promised you were going to be here for a birthday. And they're saying, I got drafted. It was mandatory. I couldn't leave. So we're creating a much bigger problem than it has to be. And so we have to be willing to open up and stop trying to recruit this certain ideal candidate. And I'm not talking about lowering hiring standards. That's not what I'm saying, right? But I want to give you this is what came out of the uh, hiring process performance review. I want to make sure I use the right word because they changed it from an audit to a performance review. Here's what came out of it. And before I tell you what came out of it, let me tell you who I am. At 23 years old, I was being sent into a home of families that had been married for 20 years, dealing with problems they'd had for 15, 16, 17 years. And I'm being told, go handle these, right? And I got about 10 or 15 minutes to figure it out. I've never been married. I don't even have any kids, right? But we're sending people, young people, in to deal with people in adversity. We're sending young people to go and deal with people in their worst moments. We're not sending people to go and, dance at birthday parties. We're really not. So here's what the hiring process. So candidate A grew up in a middle class family, regular person, went to high school, played sports. Both parents worked, made good money, lived in Orange County, and went to college. When he was about 17, 18 years old, his parents put his name on a credit card, like here, add a user. They bought a car for him when he was in high school. When he went to college, about his second year, he kind of started working, got some jobs. He wanted a new car. He bought a new car. His parents co-signed for him. If the job didn't work out, he quit. They got laid off, whatever. He had all of these safety nets, right? He gets out of college and, he wants to come in law enforcement and he applies. And man, look at this kid. He's got great credit, never been in trouble. He shows completion. He's got a college degree. All of these things are ideal. He is what we call an ideal candidate. Now let's look at candidate B. Young lady who grew up in South LA, went to Washington High, single family parent, right? Single parent family, I'm sorry. Her mother does not have a good high paying job. Her mother works. And if her mother doesn't work, she doesn't get paid because she doesn't have sick time. So her mother gets injured. First of all, she went through Washington High and stayed out of trouble. That's saying something right there in and of itself, right? So now she's going to El Camino College. She's taking classes. She's working. She's trying to improve her lot in life. Her mother gets into an accident. She's no longer working. She's no longer getting paid. What does this young lady do? She goes and she says, don't worry about it. I'm going to help. I go get a second job. She gets a second job, right? Now hours, time, sleep, what starts to suffer? Grades. Maybe she missed the drop deadline. Maybe she missed the withdrawal deadline. Maybe she couldn't drop these classes. So her grades suffered. Now, she's also a young lady who's about the same age, maybe in her early 20s now, who bought a car. Nobody co-signed for her. Nobody gave her a credit card. Now her younger sister is coming up in her senior year and she wants to go to prom. So this young lady makes a decision to help her younger sister out with a dress. Car note is late, certain things are late, never gets repossessed, but she prioritizes the best that she can. And she's trying to help her family. She goes and she applies and she's like, oh, look, she's got horrible credit. Oh, she didn't finish her classes. I mean, look at these dings that she has on her credit. And so there's no completion there. But if you ask me, who's really a more responsible person? Who's had to deal with some adversity? Who's had to prioritize in their life? This other guy hasn't had to prioritize anything because it's all been handed to him. But that's the standard that law enforcement is looking for to say, hey, this is a great candidate. This is the one that we want. And this is the person that we're going to send into a home in the city of Compton or East LA or South LA and say, go deal with adversity. Never been there. Doesn't know what adversity looks like. Doesn't know how to relate to the people that are there. But they're a great candidate. That's the one we're going to hire. So I think there's a big problem.
Why can't we have both of those people?
I agree. It is. But guess what? A gets hired, B gets disqualified. I agree. Why can't we have both of them? Nothing is wrong with either one of them. But my point is the standard is established and set so that candidate B gets disqualified, right? There's not enough, and even then, a lot of times, even the disqualifications are subjective,
Hmm.
right? I could understand if there was somebody that really sat down and went through it. Now, if you there are people out there that are just irresponsible, that just aren't doing good things and aren't making their way in life, but how do we do that? How do we get both of them in? That's the
Hmm.
key. And so I think when you really look at it, especially when you're looking at, well, hey, backgrounds, we got to get through all these files, we got to get through all these applicants. It's easy to just, how do I get it off my desk as fast as I can so I can get to the next one? You disqualify candidate B quickly. You get a credit report. Nope. You get a transcript. Nope. They're out. And you
So
just
then
move on to the next.
I'll ask you the question that I asked on the whole mental illness thing. What's the solution? Because as a civilian in Los Angeles County that is staunchly supports law enforcement, I personally don't care if the law enforcement is 80% white or 80% black or 80% Hispanic or 80% gay. I don't care. I just want them to be
I'm with you.
efficient
Yeah.
and trustworthy. So, and to your point, I've never been a cop, but I do believe in the value of community policing to an extent. I mean, to your point, do you want to throw a white 23-year-old that, doesn't have any kids, isn't married, into a situation where he's got to talk to an African American family where five people are living in a one-bedroom house to try and deal with that? Probably doesn't make sense. Or do you want somebody, that, maybe spent a little bit of time in a gang, only has misdemeanors, turned his life around, understand what it's like to live in that neighborhood, and go in and say, hey, I get it, but this is what needs to happen. Sure, as a supporter of police officers, I want that second guy to be in Compton. But how do you what's the solution? How do we get to a point where we get both candidate A and candidate B, and we're able to put candidate A in the right situation where he does a great job for Los Angeles County, and candidate B in the right situation so she does a great job for Los Angeles County? How do we come to that solution?
First of all, I think the first thing we do is we stop doing these hard cutoffs, right? We start saying, well, if your credit score is below this, you know what I mean? We're not asking you to repay a loan. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? So first of all, we stop doing these hard cutoffs. Like your credit score is bad, you can't get hired, or you don't have, you got an F or a D on a transcript, right? You don't get hired. Because those are the kind of things that they're looking at where we're not really evaluating the set of circumstances that put a person there. That's number one. We have to stop having these hard cutoffs where it just automatically disqualifies a person. And we have to be able to put in a little bit more investigative process into finding out what a set of circumstances are that leads a person to be there. And we have to have accountability at higher levels. Listen, I have a cousin that worked on the department. Her son was 19 years old when he applied to be a custody assistant, not even a deputy, a developmental position. He got disqualified because at his last job, he didn't give a 2 week notice. And he didn't give a 2 week notice because he was being mistreated. He didn't give a 2 week notice because he was done, in a way that he did not agree with as a human. And so he quit. Somebody allowed that disqualification to go through. We have to have people that are going to be checking on these disqualifications and make sure that they're valid. Make sure that they're reasonable. We can't give our background investigators this complete subjectivity where they can, hey, I'm disqualified, and then there's some sergeant that's rubber stamping them because they got 100, 150 files on their desk that they just want to hurry up and get through. Um, I think number one is we need to increase recruitment. We need to put a lot of effort into recruitment and recruiting people. not just certain groups or in certain areas. Like you said at the SHOT Show, everybody's there recruiting, right? We need to be on these college campuses. We need to be at the criminal justice um, um, courses, and
Probably need to be earlier. You probably need to be in high school or junior
in
high.
high school. Yeah, absolutely. We need to be getting them into these explorer programs.
Mm,
We need to get them into the cadet program so that we know that we're building a foundation with them. There's a lot of different ways that we can do it out there, but I will tell you this. Um, a lot of are we recruiting a lot of former athletes come into law enforcement and the fire department? Are we
mm,
recruiting them? And I think the reality of what we need to do is we need to make our backgrounds much more efficient. People waiting 8, 9 months to a year, we're losing a lot of candidates. And they
yeah.
don't need to be that long. They really don't. Um, so we got to look at what our hiring standard is. And I want to make sure that I'm saying we don't lower the hiring standard, but we also look at what have we been doing for all the decades that we've been kind of using the same hiring standard, and what are we getting out of it? You know what I mean? And again, I go back to this. Let's look at the problems that we're having in law enforcement right now. The reality of
Yeah.
it is somebody hired all the people that are creating the problems in law enforcement. So is our hiring standard really all that awesome and great? I want to say this, the vast majority of cops are doing a great job. The
Mm.
vast majority are doing a great job. We're doing outstanding. They're there for the good reasons and they're doing good work. But we still have a lot of failures. So we have to look at our hiring process.
Yeah, as a former banker, I will tell you on the credit scores that there are some people I'd rather loan money to that have a 570 credit score than a 720 credit score. It's just a number.
Mm. Right, right.
Yeah, Eric, I could talk to you for another hour, but we're kind of up to our time, and you are a busy guy running a campaign and trying to get elected and do great things for Los Angeles County and us people that live here. Before I let you go, what's kind of the last word? What do you want people to know specifically about Eric Strong?
I want people to know that Eric is pragmatic, right? We just want to do things better. We know that there are better systems and better ways of doing things out there. And this, we have to get away from, um, number one, party, race, um, political stance, and we just have to really get into a humanitarian view. And I think that's what I am. I want to take care of people. I want to take care of the citizens. I want to take care of the community. I want to take care of our personnel, our deputies. And having done this job 32 years, I love the profession. I really
Mm,
do. I think it's great. It's honorable. But I think the industry is hurting the industry. The profession is hurting the profession, and we got to stop blaming everybody else, and we got to really look inside. We got to fix ourselves first, and I will say this: the last thing I want to wrap up is with this.
mm,
When you look at deputy sheriffs that treat deputy sheriffs poorly on the inside, how can we expect them to treat the community well when somewhere in our culture we haven't figured out how to treat each other well?
yeah,
So what I want people to know is I'm willing to be candid and I'm willing to say, hey, let's look at these problems. They're real and let's fix them.
yeah. Yeah, a lot of complex problems out there, but maybe I'm naive. I think that there are definite solutions that can come to bear. Yeah, Eric, you were such a joy talking to. For those folks out there, especially those folks in Los Angeles County that want to learn more about you, what you're about, your campaign, how best can they find an Eric Strong out there?
So they can find me everything, my social media, my website, everything is Strong for Sheriff. Strong, the number four, Sheriff. www Strong for Sheriff. Social media Strong for Sheriff. YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. And if you want to get in touch with me personally, shoot me an email at info@strongforsheriff.com.
All right, next time I have a problem, I'm going to email you and say, "Hey, Eric, can you come out to Long Beach and help me with this?"
And Kenneth, don't be surprised if you get a response too.
I very well may. I would be shocked if I didn't. Eric, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, and thank you for your support for law enforcement and all that you do to help get the message out there. I truly appreciate you.
My pleasure. And thank you to all of you who have either watched or listened to this episode of Public Safety Talk Radio. And we'll be back with you next week with another great guest. Public Safety Talk Radio is produced by Bader Training and Consulting. Public Safety Talk Radio is also proud to be a part of the growing National Police Podcast Network. The National Police Podcast Network is a dedicated media network powered by the National Police Federal Credit Union, developed in partnership with experienced podcast professionals and public safety advocates. Learn more about the National Police Federal Credit Union at nationalpolicefcu.com.